power is living in people's minds and manipulating them without them realizing it. I'm Marlene Keaton. I'm 38 years old. I have a degree in psychology from New York University. Reading human behavior, knowing what they will react to before they even realize it. That's my job. For 10 years, I worked for a media analysis company, but my main job was living in people's minds. I was married 7 years. My husband, Julian, was in advertising, creative director, smart, charming, ambitious, but in my opinion, a weak mind. We were in Paris when I first realized this. After a big psychology seminar full of leading names in the industry, we went to a nightclub in the evening. The lights were dim, the music soft. People were dancing, laughing, wearing masks. Julian was walking to the bar when I noticed her. A tall woman in a black dress with dark red lipstick. Time froze when he and Julian locked eyes. It wasn't a flirtatious look. In that moment, two minds recognized each other. I've been analyzing human behavior for years, and there I saw a change in Julian's posture. His shoulders tensed, a faint smile formed at the corner of his lips. It was as if a window had opened in his mind and the wind was coming in. And I was outside the window. I didn't say anything that night. But the first thing I did when we got back to New York was access his cell phone. He never understood how I knew that password. People often hide their most confidential information in the shortest places. The messages, short but dense, as if there was code in every line. The photos, nothing physical had happened yet, but that mind connection, it was already established. And Julian, sitting at home every day at the same table with me, was living in another world. He hears my questions, but he tailors his answers to her. I was still his wife, but mentally abandoned. I didn't confront him about this betrayal, because for a psychologist, being betrayed is not painful. But the underestimation of the power of the mind, that's a wound so deep that words can't describe it. Julian didn't just cheat. He thought I didn't understand. He underestimated my intelligence, as if I wasn't of the caliber to participate in his mental collision. That's when I decided this wasn't going to be a classic story of infidelity. I was going to infiltrate his soul like a shadow. Even in those moments when he felt lonely, unsuccessful, worthless, he would not understand why. Because it wouldn't be a fight. There would be no yelling, no screaming, no reckoning. I would be a virus in his mind. I felt like a scientist. I was in the field observing. I was getting to know my target, watching his habits, noting his triggers. Lying quietly in our bed at night when Julian was asleep, I memorized the rhythm of his breathing. I was making little noises in her dreams, trying to sense what she was afraid of. I was unraveling him, and as I unraveled, not a sense of revenge grew in me, but a cold-blooded ruthlessness. I wasn't sentimental. I wanted justice, but the kind of justice he would understand, the one that comes with mental breakdown. When I decided to make my first attempt, the date was irrelevant, because it was no longer a date, but an experiment. One morning over breakfast with Julian, I brought up a simple subject, that executives in the advertising industry are more prone to burnout syndrome. I smiled slightly. Creative minds like yours are always more fragile, you know. It sounded like a compliment, but I opened a small crack in his mind. I planted a seed of doubt. The next day I said the same sentence, this time in front of a friend. As a psychologist, it seemed like a joke, but that uncertainty in Julian's eyes, that's what I wanted. I wanted him to feel like a puzzle beginning to unravel. A week later, I found a file missing from his office, but before I found it, maybe there had been a little displacement. What I said when I found the file, "You've been so preoccupied lately. Maybe you should take a break." And he doubted himself for the first time. A small one, a very small doubt. But I know, when the mind starts to fight within itself, no external blows are needed. Now it was about timing, repetition, and environmental support. One of our mutual friends, someone I had directed, of course, told Julian, "Is everything okay? You seemed a little distracted at the last presentation." Julian looked in the mirror for the first time. This was not a breakdown. It was a beginning. I was still the loving wife, supportive, understanding, perfect wife. But in every conversation, in every look, in every joking sentence, I was leaving another voice in her mind. He was no longer thinking alone. I was accompanying his thoughts. Without realizing it, he was arguing with me, answering me, being attracted to me. And at that moment, I realized that this was not revenge. I realized it was an art. Now the game had begun, and I knew that my only opponent in this game was myself, because Julian didn't even know he was in a mental battle yet. First, I organized his environment. I reorganized our mutual friends. I arranged them around profiles that questioned less, praised more, but also left little doubts. Everyone had a job description, someone to pat his self-esteem, someone to gently point out his mistakes, but none of it would look suspicious. People are more easily manipulated than you think. You just need to say the right word, with the right expression at the right moment. I wrote a professional rise script for Julian. I had him pitch an ad campaign under his own name that he didn't actually write. I wrote all the content, but I presented it as supporting his idea, not giving it to him. So he believed that this creative breakthrough was the result of his own genius. After the presentation, he received praise. I just stood one step behind him, while others around him admired him. But inside I knew, Julian was carrying a success that was no longer his own, and this success would, over time, become a burden on his mind. One night when he was slightly drunk, I whispered to him, "Sometimes the weight of success is harder to carry than failure, isn't it?" He looked at me then. He smiled, but his eyes darkened for a moment. Did he understand? No, she didn't, but he sensed it. And intuition is the first step for the mind to start questioning. I started making small changes at home. I was putting her clothes in the wrong places. I deleted some invitations to her emails as if they hadn't arrived. One day she lost her organizer in her purse. Then she couldn't find her car keys for a long time. I didn't raise my voice at any of this. I just said, "Are you distracted again?" "Maybe you're a little tired." And he blamed himself, and these accusations began to echo in his mind over time. Tired, absent-minded, forgetful. Was he getting sick? Added to this were the physical symptoms. Sleep problems, irritable outbursts, lack of self-confidence. And I was still there for her. On the surface, I was his supporter. But this support was not to lift him up. It was like a hand raising him up to make him fall harder. Julian was no longer the same man. His eyes were darker, his voice slower, his steps more uneasy. Gone was the confident man, replaced by someone who lived on edge, as if he could make a mistake at any moment. One morning, drinking his coffee, I noticed that he held his hand trembling. It was as if he couldn't feel the warmth. I looked at him, and without saying anything, I just said, "Did you get enough sleep last night?" I repeated this sentence every morning for a week. One morning, I waited for him to ask. I couldn't sleep. It's like my mind stopped, and that's when I knew. The mind was locked. She was no longer alone in her head. I was there too, with my whispers, my silence, my presence. I magnified a small mistake he made at work. I hinted to his manager that Julian had been a bit overloaded lately, gently in a concerned tone. When Julian got home that day, his phone rang from his supervisor. "Take some time off if you want. A vacation will do you good." Something inside him collapsed. He turned to me. You know what he said? "They don't trust me anymore. It's like I'm not the same." I just kept quiet. Silence is the most effective echo of guilt. That night, he poured himself a small drink. He never drank. It was a sign. His defenses were broken. Julian was no longer the architect of his mind, but its tenant. Every thought hit me, every emotion passed through my filter. One night when he lay in our bed, I left the closet light on. The light shone directly into his eyes. I didn't turn it off. I waited to see when he would turn it off. Did she still have limits? Could he hold out? For 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes he didn't move. Then her eyes filled up. The only sentence he said in a low voice, "I'm not well, am I?" I looked into his eyes. I nodded very slowly, but I didn't say anything. Because what he was most afraid of now was losing my approval, to become inadequate in my eyes. One morning in the shower, I wiped the fog off the mirror and wrote a note for him. "You don't have to be strong. When you give people the exact sentence they usually want to hear, their minds surrender." He went to bed early that day. She did not speak. She cried silently, facing her pillow. And that's when I realized I was no longer someone she knew. I had erased the notions of trust, serenity, and companionship from him, and replaced them with uncertainty, dependence, and silence. Julian needed me now, but not with love. It was woven with fear, confusion, and despair. Maybe he didn't want to be with me. He couldn't carry himself without me. That morning, everything seemed normal. I prepared breakfast, Fresh orange juice on the table, thin slices of bread, his favorite jam. But Julian had no appetite. His face was pale. He put his hands on the edge of the table, staring at the floor. "Is something wrong?" I asked him. He didn't answer. He just shook his head. As the silence stretched on, the emptiness inside him grew. He couldn't even hear his own voice anymore. And something inside me said, now. It was the right time for the final stage of the plan. I took the first step with a slight sense of annihilation. That day I packed the whole house. Without saying anything, just my things. A suitcase, a note, and only 3 sentences. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but the day you betrayed your own mind, you betrayed me. Now you are alone with your own mind." I left the note on the table. I was careful not to make a sound when I closed the door, because sometimes the silent closing of a door can be louder than a scream. Julian couldn't reach me that evening. I didn't answer my phone calls. I didn't return his emails. I disappeared without a trace for a day, 2 days, 3 days. On the 4th day, a mutual friend called. "Julian is in bad shape. They found him crying in the mirror. He won't go to work. He doesn't speak. He just repeats the same sentence. Why have I become like this?" At that moment, the clock seemed to stop. The final phase of the plan was complete. It was not a collapse, but a rebirth. But if he had to be reborn, he had to be completely dismantled first. A week later, Julian reached me. In a hollow, dull but pleading voice, he asked, "Can you make me you again?" When I heard that sentence, everything inside me fell silent, because I was at the point where I wanted to be. But I didn't go back to him, because justice in this story was not forgiveness. Justice was to turn the invisible traces of mental violence into a mirror and reflect them back to her. The mental game he started by comparing me to that woman. He ended up disappearing into his own mind. When I came back, I didn't give a speech. I didn't say goodbye. I just left my key. As a psychologist, I had finished the experience. And my most difficult case was now alone with himself. Me, I had minds to rebuild, but never again to approach anyone who would take my own mind for granted. If you find a piece of yourself in this story, or if one day you saw what sneaking into someone's mind can lead to, leave a comment. It can guide other silent minds. Don't forget to like, because every like is a warning against unseen manipulations. And subscribe, because this is not just a story. More truths await you in the dark corridors of the mind. In the next video, maybe your story will be